Broadcasting from the Red Bed Plains, you are now listening to Through the Prairie Smoke.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Through the Prairie Smoke. I'm Tyler, and I'm here with my buddy.
I'm Dustin, and I'm also here with my buddy.
And we get together and smoke a cigar or smoke a pipe and talk about interesting stories and thoughts and spiritualism. And we thought, wouldn't it be cool to do a examination of all the local mythology or folklore or ghost stories or anything like that and record it for a podcast? So yeah, here we are. And to start things off with how we are going to approach these stories, we thought it might be a good idea to talk about the concept of spiritualism, and who better to start that conversation with than the Fox sisters.
Agreed.
And so if you went up to a random person on the street, if they had heard of the Fox sisters at all, what do you think they'd say about them?
Hey, isn't that those mediums that faked everything and started a religion by tricking people?
Yeah, that's probably true. You know, there might be some people on the fence. You know, they talked with knocks. Ghost was knock at them. That's how they communicated with these ghosts. But yeah, they did start a spiritual movement called Spiritualism. And they're kind of responsible for modern spiritualism. And so, even though we have some knowledge already about this stuff, because this is stuff we talk about and this is stuff we're interested in, we decided to do even further research. And so we've been reading some books, and we thought we'd share this story that's really interesting. And there's a lot more than just some girls who were popping their toe joints to make people think they were talking to ghosts. It's a long story, and it's a human story. So anyway, it's really fascinating, and we hope everyone enjoys it. The book that I read, where most of my notes come from, would be Barbara Weisberg's Talking to the Dead. And Dustin, what have you been reading?
I have read mostly The Missing Link in Modern Spiritualism by Anne Leah Underhill, which is actually the oldest Fox sister.
Yeah.
Somewhat a biography type situation.
A first-person account. But some years ago, you'd read Talking to the Dead as well.
Yes, I vaguely remember things because I have a horrible memory. But,
Sure.
But yes, I've read that book and many of other things. And then also, before I started on this book, I read The Death Blow to Spiritualism, which is the author's name I don't have in front of me, but he it was a written account from Maggie Fox, and
at what point
we
in
would
their
get
life?
at to way later on in the story of the girls, but more of a confession. But anyways, we'll get more into that.
Yeah. That wasn't early in the movement. That was much later.
That was much later, yes. My wonderful producer has just produced the author of that book, which is Reuben Briggs Davenport, in case you're interested.
Yep. All right. So let's talk about what we're smoking this evening.
That sounds good. I'm smoking a cigar tonight. Currently smoking the Disciple from Diesel Cigars. I've had it many times. It's pretty good. How about you?
Did you put conscious thought into that? Like this would set the mood?
Actually, no, until you said that. And now I'm like, why, yes. Yes, I did, Tyler. What are you smoking?
Toad Morton, which is from my blend from my local tobacco shop.
Toad my goats.
Yeah. Like the way it smelled. And it's a nice smoke, too.
I do like the smell of it. It has that smoky...
Can you believe it?
Smoky. But, you know.
Yes. All right. Let's set the scene for the time period here. These are the late 1840s. And, you know, electricity isn't a thing widely at the moment. The telegraph is brand new. So technology, it's not quite what we have today.
All kinds of movements.
All kinds of movements, yes. Mainly religious movements, spiritual movements. And this, we're talking about the late 1840s. Western New York is an interesting place as far as paranormal activity goes. Also kind of an American spiritual movement, Mormonism. Joseph Smith, the founder of that religion, had his visitations, encounters in Western New York. So anyway, this is an interesting time and an interesting place and interesting people. Westward expansion is occurring. And religions up to that time had kind of been, here's the creation, here's why we're here, and we just do what we do. But when westward expansion came and Americans really seized on that excitement and manifest destiny, they were looking for new movements that more reflected what they were experiencing. During this time, especially when we start talking about seances and spirits, entities, things like that, when people in this time period, just like today, many people held many different ideas of what something might mean. And so even for this time period, saying spirit, that may mean entity, just something other, or it could be a former human, a person who was alive but is now in a spirit form. That's something to keep in mind as we talk about seances and spirit communication. It meant different things to different people. There are huge movements, huge social movements. Slavery is still a thing. We have not hit the Civil War yet. And abolitionism is a movement. This is, of course, a northern state. As it turns out, many spiritualists were also abolitionists. Also, women's suffrage movement. Important people in American history are very involved in the Fox Sisters story, which is fascinating. Because it's an American movement. It's part of American history. And then just pointing out, there was the area of Rochester and Hydesville. Is it Hydesville?
Yes.
Like that area is part of the burned over district as far as the Christian fundamentalism, that revival that was happening there. And it was referred to as burned over because there was no one left to convert. Everyone had converted to Christianity in that area.
I'm glad you said that, because I've heard you say it, and unfortunately I haven't read that, and so I was like, what did they burn? But that makes sense.
They had already converted everyone.
Yeah.
So, these spiritual ideas are extremely popular. And it is a moment, like I mentioned, the women's suffrage movement. Women don't have the right to vote, and women don't really have a strong place in society. It's mostly in the home. And so these religious movements, church and worship services, that's where both men and women were gathering together, essentially doing the same thing. So, there are a lot of social things happening. Like, this is a wild time for the people who experienced it. Average life expectancy at the time is about 45 years. But people could...
Oh, really?
Yeah. People could
Wow.
and often lived into their 70s. It's just, it has to do with, like, child mortality and things like that. Like, there were a lot of young deaths that skewed the average.
Well, I knew that. I, for some reason, have always been stuck on the average was 70-something. But that's crazy to think of that. But what is now? Have you heard anything about nowadays? What? I mean, would you be safe to say 100? Or are we looking 80s, 90s, maybe?
Probably 80 years old, I would guess.
Yeah.
It dropped recently, I think, in America specifically.
Really?
Yeah. 76.33 years as of 2021.
So I guess I was just
optimistic.
Living right now.
Yeah, living in the moment, dude.
So 45, wow, that's... that makes sense.
Sure.
That does make sense. But I think people grew up faster back then as well. I understand why it was so young on the, but it seemed just like people if you read about certain historical figures, it's just like you're hearing their story and you're like, man, wow, they've lived a life. And then it says, yeah, they died at 27. And you're like,
Yeah.
wait,
They accomplished
I'm
their...
like double their age. And I haven't accomplished shit. No, I'm just kidding. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, back on track.
They accomplished their biggest thing, and they were 17 years old. Yeah. So education is spotty, you know. But the social movements, as far as women go, it's very active. Women are actively seeking a place in society. So it is it's a difficult time, especially for young women, because some people demand polite society, and other people are like, nah, you know, you're just a person.
Yeah, it's speaking of all this, us being from Oklahoma and living in Oklahoma and growing up with Oklahoma history, we were heavily exposed to like as far as history lessons and stuff like that of the Wild West. I mean, we're hearing stories of like outlaws and cowboys and just these small towns with dirt roads and saloons and stuff. Growing up like that, I was like, that's because we're in Oklahoma, so yes, that's a big part of us, so we're learning all that. And my whole perception of the Wild West, and then later on in life I start getting really into the Victorian age and the England and just that kind of stuff. And when I think Victorian age, it's strictly to men in suits, women in these dresses. The society is like politeness. There's just all kinds of things. It's kind of like elegant and all that.
The rules and purpose
and
that everyone's
everything
doing.
Manufactured at that time, like everything, like there was thought put into design and into everything was. Anyways, I love the age.
Yeah.
But never once did I put two and two together that while I'm thinking England Victorian, this Wild West is happening at the same time. But you think I would piece that together, but you just don't, or I don't.
Yeah, sure.
And
it's so separate.
So thinking of that happening at the same time and how much difference there is in the region and population, I guess would have a lot to do with it as well, because they're just now moving west. Everything's growing west. So, but anyways, so it's while we're listening further on in this story, keep in the back of your mind that there's shootouts in saloons going on way west.
Yeah.
And then it kind of makes you giggle when you think of it.
Sure.
'Cause you're like, woohoo!
Yeah. They're talking about ghosts over here, and it's the Wild West over there. So, speaking about women experience during this time, hysteria is often diagnosed, and it's
very
just
common diagnosis.
Yeah.
For anybody that shows any kind of craziness.
The Texas Revolution happened about a decade before, and Whigs are a political party. They're battling the Democrats, and that means something different than the modern usage. But anyway, that's kind of what America looks like at the time, the region.
Yep.
And so let's talk about the Fox family themselves. The important members, of course, are the Fox sisters. But let's start with John and Margaret. And they have kind of this interesting story. Margaret, I guess, was called Peggy by her grandparents. And through that line of the family, apparently there were reports of clairvoyance and things like that. So paranormal experiences are common in that family. I guess we don't know a whole lot about John Fox's parents or childhood or anything like that.
No, I mean, I've never come across stuff, but I'm not living in libraries and going through a bunch of stuff.
Sure.
But yeah, you're right. There's really no talk of his side of the family.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually Margaret's side of the family that has all these unique little stories that come from the family tree.
Yeah.
But
we may talk about some of those.
Well, it comes later on, so
Yeah.
it's something we can always touch base on, because there are some cool stories of those family members.
Do you need some ice cream?
Shut up. You guys your neighborhood has an ice cream truck?
Yeah, dude.
I didn't know you guys were living so big.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew it was a nice neighborhood. You got a nice house. I just didn't know that you had ice cream trucks. I mean, now that just stepped you up a level.
What do you think? No,
Yes, folks.
It doesn't matter.
We're doing a podcast out of our garage.
That's right.
Tyler's garage.
Yeah, where else do you... It
Dude,
doesn't matter.
It's not how you start or where you start.
That's right.
It's how you finish.
That's
Is that the saying? I'm making that up. Oh, yeah, back on track. So, John.
Yep. John, yeah. John and Margaret get married. They have some kiddos, but John has a gambling problem and a drinking problem, and they kind of go their separate ways. You know, we talked about these spiritual movements. John got swept up in Methodism and converted and completely gave up gambling and alcohol, and Margaret took him back. And that is the reunion after their decade separation.
Yeah, it was a while, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
That they get back together, and then Maggie and Kate are born.
Yes. Before that, though, before the separation and reunion, that is when David and Leah are born. They're before
Right.
the separation.
Before separation.
And that's what makes them older than Maggie. Or there's actually, there's a few years difference. So, but there's, as far as I've read, there were 7 Fox kids, and you have Maggie, and you have Kate, and you have Leah, and you have David. So that's 4. They have another older sister that was also on the before the split. I haven't read too much about her. I'm sure there's information on her, but she's not mentioned as much, and I think it's just one of those, she lives in a different place. She probably didn't like the fame. You know what, Tyler? It's just like the Osbournes. They have a older sibling.
Is that right?
There's, you know Jack, Kelly. There's another sibling.
Huh.
That doesn't want to be on camera, doesn't want to do all
Sure.
that, so kind of more private life.
Sure.
So, anyways.
Okay.
But,
yeah, I get it.
So that's similar. So that,
Yeah.
and then they had, what does that put me at, 5?
Yeah.
And then there was an infant that had passed away. I
Pre
don't know why I'm thinking
pre-split.
7, but I could be wrong. So, but the ones that we hear of the most are going to be David, Leah, Kate, and Maggie. So.
Yep. And then the mother, Margaret, also plays an important role in the story.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. Yep.
So these Fox women are the important characters in the story.
So we're in Hydesville.
Yep.
New York.
When we're talking about this, though, they were born in Canada, weren't they?
I believe so. Yeah.
And then they, for whatever reason, it's not real clear and not necessarily important, but John and Margaret Fox wanted to move closer to their eldest son, David, who had a farm in western New York.
Yeah.
They were building a house there to be next door to his farm, but during the winter and the unseasonably cold spring, building had ceased on it. So they had to rent a house and stay in this house longer than they had expected.
Yeah. That house was 2 miles away from David's house.
And it takes a little bit of time to go those 2 miles,
Oh, yeah.
And at this time, the important time at the beginning of this story, Leah, the oldest Fox sister in the story, is in Rochester as a single mother.
Yep. She has a daughter named Lizzie, and to make ends meet, she teaches music, mainly the piano, to pupils, and that's how she makes her money, with private lessons. So they're in Rochester, but sometimes Lizzie would live in Hydesville with John and Margaret and the 2 girls, because Lizzie's about close to Kate's age, because Kate's the youngest. During our story, during this whole 1840, this is in 1848. And at 1848, from census records and Margaret's, notes, they all say that Maggie was 14 and Kate was 12. So.
All right. And this house that they're living in, while they're waiting for their other house to be constructed, it's in Hydesville, and it's already got a reputation in town. It's
the spook house.
Yeah, we would know it today as a haunted house. That's a haunted house. Previous tenants had talked about seeing apparitions,
hearing footsteps,
which is something I learned reading about this subject. I hadn't heard that before, so that was new and exciting.
That people lived in it before and
had
experienced it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it was at least 2 families that had heard noises and only one that saw apparition.
Yes. It's known around town that, hey, stuff has happened in that place, or
noises
people have heard
stuff
stuff
like
in that place.
Yeah.
So it's already a haunted wonderland.
Yeah. So John and Margaret and Maggie and Kate live in this house, and we suspect at times from accounts that Lizzie is there as well, Leah's daughter. And they hear noises in the house. They mostly describe them as footsteps.
Right.
And they're different enough that they are able to give names to what they think is making the noise. And just based on steps, one of the ones that's mentioned the most is Mr. Splitfoot.
They hear this stuff periodically here and there, which can also be written off as, it's a wooden structure house. Stuff creaks, wood expands, and
it's got a basement with a dirt floor, so there's moisture.
I mean, and so there's a lot of noise that, stuff that can be attributed to noises.
Sure.
So I think that's why leading up to March that they don't put a lot of focus into it. And so
they just kind of
that's
accept
importantly
it.
Noted that's my theory.
Yeah.
And so, the noises are there.
Of course, everybody hears noises in houses.
Right.
Sure.
But it's not until the week, which would be probably last week of March.
Yeah.
And leading up to March 31st.
Mm-hmm.
And that week is when stuff gradually gets a little more serious and a little more frequent.
Let's talk about the last week of March, 1848. It's the spook house in Hydesville. John, Margaret, Maggie, Kate, they've been hearing these noises all week long, and their thumps, their knocks, their footsteps. They're probably not sleeping all that well. So it's majority happening at night. And we like this theory that they're sleep deprived. In all of the notes and everything that we've read, it talks about how it is an early evening on March 31st, 1848. And the family is gathered in one room. It's still light outside. Fresh snow on the ground, and they're going to try to get some sleep. When the knocking starts happening, the girls, they're not enjoying this. This isn't a good time. But I think Margaret has this idea maybe to come up with a game to maybe calm them down a little bit. And so they start addressing the noise and saying, "Can you do this?" And then they would clap a rhythm, and then that rhythm would be knocked back at them.
Repeated.
Yeah.
Clap, clap, clap.
So that clap is kind of how this first communication happened. This is an entity, potentially a spirit, that we have communicated with, in a way.
Yeah. Not to step on your toes, when they start hearing this stuff, it's like described as John, he's had enough. He's fed up with not getting any sleep, working all day, and then, sleep deprived, in our theory. And so he's fed up with these noises. He gets up, Margaret gets up, the girls are up. They start walking around the house, trying to find out where these noises are, trying to pinpoint knockings, not having any luck. At some points, they even think that it's coming from outside, that somebody is messing with them because, being March 31st, the next day is April Fool's Day. So even one of the girls is like, hey, you know, old Tommy down the street's coming over and he's bugging us.
We're getting pranked.
But when John walks around the house on the outside, he can't find anything. And so going back into what you're saying, Tyler, is the girls may have been at first, but now they're kind of like, it's a game of finding out where are these things coming from. And then I just kind of reset us a little bit back, but now we're going to jump back into what you were saying. So go ahead. Sorry. But Margaret, and they do continue to communicate with the noises. And so I think that's when they start finding out from just basic questions being asked with a knock once is yes, knock two is no, or just real simple. And I think in that little bit of asking questions, they find out that it was somebody that had been murdered in the house. So this is when John and Margaret start showing a little bit of, woo, okay, this is getting real. And the girls are like...
Before we get to that point, though, it's like simple questions, simple yes or no questions.
Yeah, that lead up to it. Yeah.
And then I think Margaret has a clear idea in her mind, like she thinks this is a spirit. She thinks this is someone who once was and is no longer, but is now here communicating. And so she asks the questions like, tell me the age of all my children, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's one of the questions.
And this entity, this thing, knows enough about her that it can answer correctly.
Yeah.
And when these things are happening, they're baffled and they're like, oh my God, we have to go get the neighbors. And so they go next door and talk to the couple next door. And it's Mr. and Mrs. Redfield. And they convince Mrs. Redfield to come over. And they do a series of questions that get appropriate answers. And so Mrs. Redfield is like, I've got to go get my husband. He's got to see this. And so she goes and gets her husband and brings him over. And then more neighbors come over. The Duzlers come over. Mr. and Mrs. Hyde come over. And the Jewels come over. And it's just this big, hey, something's weird's going on right here in the neighborhood. Come check it out. And at some point, David arrives. And David comes up with, well, let's say the alphabet and have it knock on the letters. And that way we can communicate in long stretches and sentences. And that's where we get that this is a person who claims to be murdered, who had been murdered and buried in the basement of this house.
Correct, yeah.
So as things start to get more serious, the girls are freaking out, and Margaret is like, well, you should probably get the girls out of here. And so Kate and Maggie and Margaret go to stay at David's that evening. And John and Mr. Redfield stay at the house that whole time. And then this is a spirit who claims to have been, the human form has been murdered and buried in the basement. And so they're going to go let's go find it. So it's this series of, go down to the basement and we're like, is it here? Waiting for a knock, a game of hot and cold, warmer. And so they start digging. When they get a hit. Do they find anything the first time they start digging?
I don't believe so. They're digging and digging, and then they hit a water table.
Yeah, they almost immediately hit the water table.
So everything's, so this is going to go on for, it's not really specified, weeks, days, a month, but it does go on. We know for at the very least several days.
Let's talk a little bit about who this spirit claims to have been formerly. This spirit claims to have been, is it Charles B. Rosna, and he's a traveling merchant, sells stuff door to door. And it's interesting that such a claim is made because this is a small town, and we everybody knows the people who lived there before. So you're claiming our former neighbor murdered some guy and buried him in the basement? Like, this is a big deal. It's a heck of an accusation, I mean, yeah, it's the Wild West elsewhere in the country, but it's polite society where they are.
I mean, it is a smaller community outside of the bigger city, so I mean,
sure.
But Victorian age it didn't matter where you were, Wild West, in the northern eastern part of America where everything's starting, or if you were across sea. So
yeah,
around that time, death, murder, a lot of that was just like everything else.
Sure,
movement.
Yeah,
kind of.
And the social media of the time, we're talking about newspapers. So claims like this in a small town generates interest, and newspapers are looking into that interest.
Yep.
So there are lots of people coming in, some philosophical inquiries. Everyone has their own thoughts. They're skeptics. They're coming in and listening to these knocks and sounds. And what brings Leah back to Hydesville from Rochester is a client.
Yeah. So one of the parents of one of the kids that she teaches music to is there to pick up their kid, and is talking back and forth with Leah and saying, hey, did you, because this is kind of a big deal,
Sure.
and so it's one of the headliners, in the newspapers in Rochester, and she gives Leah this newspaper and says, hey, have you heard of this? Look at this. Have you seen this yet? And that's so Leah, she's kind of skimming through this thing and sees the name Fox, and then she says, "Are you related to these foxes?" And that's when she says, "Wait a minute, these are my peeps."
Sure, yeah,
And
that's my family.
yeah, so
There's a report by an E.E. Lewis, and it is called "A Report of the Mysterious Noises Heard in the House of Mr. John D. Fox in Hydesville, Arcadia, Wayne County, authenticated by the certificates and confirmed by the statements of the citizens of that place and vicinity."
very nice, Tyler. Very nice.
I haven't looked that up. I haven't read that, but anyway, this is interesting, exciting, and Leah shows up at some point when they are trying to excavate some more.
Yes.
And by now the townsfolk have their ideas. There are people who are like, absolutely not. That's my friend and neighbor. You can't do that. There are other people who are like, anything that's not Christian is absolutely unacceptable. Of the devil, I guess. So avoid it. Don't pursue it. So lots of different motivations as to why, maybe you shouldn't go digging up your basement.
Leah's voyage to Hydesville, she takes friends with her to go witness these happenings. And
You think she expects it to be happening, right? She's not going down there to be like,
yeah,
what the heck's going on? She's going down there to experience it.
Obviously, she wants to get down there because this involves her family. I don't think we mentioned, but at the time of March 31st, Lizzie's down there.
Okay.
So Lizzie is staying with them. And so Leah has several reasons to go back to Hydesville. Her family's in the newspaper. Her daughter's there. What
Sure,
the heck's
yeah.
going on?
Better go check on that.
Yeah, I got to go check on all this. So her and a couple of friends, crack it open. A couple of friends, they head down.
They come to witness.
And I think it, this is a little side piece, but
Sure.
Jumping all the way back to the beginning of this episode when we're talking about how America's set up and stuff, is and I could be wrong.
Probably.
I don't know exactly when the railroad started. When she talks about it in her book, she acts like the fastest way to get there was by canal. She did take boat.
Yeah.
To
the river. What's the big river there? The Hudson. Let's say it's the Hudson.
I promise we do research.
Well, on the important stuff.
Yeah, on the important stuff.
Geography isn't important. We went to public school.
Yeah, we live in Oklahoma.
Yeah, ain't no rivers around here.
Our lakes are man-made. America. Oh, producer.
Okay, it's not the Hudson. That's somewhere else. This is the...
Was there anything near Rochester?
Genesee. Hey, make Google say that in one of these microphones. Genesee. The Genesee River.
Genesee River. And that's how you pronounce it, folks.
Yeah, we Googled it.
Because Google said so.
Literally. Let's
Did you know Google came out in 2002?
2002.
I think so.
I don't think it did.
Uh,
I think it came out in 98.
Susan, look that up for us.
98.
What were we talking about? Yeah, Fox Sisters. So, Leah...
I remember... We shouldn't use names on this podcast.
I agree with you on that, and then I'm also shown wrong.
What year? What did I tell you?
What did you say?
1998. Because I remembered... I'm sorry, we're not recording.
No names, Tyler.
And he was being like, I'm going to sue them. Google's my word. I came up with Google. That's my word.
He did?
Yes.
That is funny.
That is one of the first things where I think that's the first time where I heard about someone saying sue as like something that you do. And coming from a peer, I was like, that's just like TV talk, man. What are you talking about? Nobody actually does that.
Yeah.
I wonder how he did with that. How do you think he did? Do you think he just ended up settling outside of court?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder what that old SOB's up to these days.
So Leah arrives by Genesee River, likely. That's how she arrives from Rochester to Hydesville. She brings her friends to the house, and townspeople are angry. They've been digging. Well,
I mean, it's just the kind of the tip of the iceberg when
Sure.
stuff starts happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and there's a big reaction from all sorts of people for all sorts of their own reasons. What it means for their beliefs, what it means for reputations, all sorts of things.
When Leah and them arrive, like I said, she brought friends. They go straight to the cabin. They witness this stuff for themselves. And they get filled in on the whole story, I imagine,
Sure.
of why they're digging.
Yeah.
And
What y'all up to?
so while these men are digging in the basement, trying to solve the mystery and channel their inner Nancy Drew, it's really cool. During their digging process, the town's fully aware of what's going on, so there's always spectators there. The place is always packed with people, and there's really no way to keep the people out of the house. And so the girls try to do their best. By the girls, I mean like Margaret, Leah, like not so much the kids. These are the older, some of the
women.
neighbor friends and wives of the men that are digging. So they start to put up kind of a perimeter, trying to play defense, because now we have some angry people. A lot of them are angry for different reasons. You have, like we've already mentioned, you have friends of the family that's under
Suspicion of murder.
You have, anyways, we don't have to regurgitate that, but the angry ones are trying to get in the house to stop the digging. And so they're doing everything that they can to get in, and the girls are doing everything they can to keep them out. There's people coming in through windows in different rooms. It eventually gets to the point where it's too much for the women to hold out of the house. So their perimeter is basically shrunk to the basement. I mean, stones are being thrown, sticks are being thrown, anything to keep the men from digging. It finally gets to a point where the women can't keep back the crowd, and the men are exhausted from digging all day, and so basically they give up. Before they give up, they do end up finding something, but it's very
Minimal.
It's minimal. But the first thing that they observe is they get to a certain point in the soil where they are hitting what they believe to be lime, large amounts of lime. And then as they keep digging through the lime, they find, it says fragments of hair. I don't, whatever.
Sure.
And then they did find a couple of human teeth, but, human teeth, lime, I mean, it's kind of adding up.
Yeah.
In a place that was pointed out by
Sure.
a bunch of knocks. So
Now, I will say, and this is going to jump way ahead into the 1900s, the house has fallen down, isn't there. but some kids are playing in what used to be the basement, and a wall is knocked over, and inside of that wall is a trunk. And what I'm thinking is, I'm putting myself in Charles Rosna's shoes, if he exists and is a person who is now a spirit, or was a spirit at that time. And he's like, they're not going to knock down their wall. I guess I'm going to show them where that dude first whacked me and my teeth fell out. And it's right there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like his body is there. In my theory, I think he's showing where his body is. There's different accounts later on of what you're speaking of when these kids go playing in the spook house that's abandoned now and has age on it and is falling apart. The wall breaks or falls apart, and then there's a trunk found. There's also bones found. There's a big pile of bones found in the wall. And these bones are later sent off for research and studied, and they come back with what they believe to be animal bones. They don't believe them to be human bones.
Right.
And so at this, that just adds more to, more questions of, is this just a hoax,
unrelated,
or was it all made up? But if you want to know my theory, Tyler, do you want to know my theory?
Yeah.
Do you think people want to know my theory?
Absolutely.
My theory is that the Bells, because we can say that now. Listen,
okay, yeah,
the
right.
family before them was the Bells.
Okay.
Okay?
They're
the ones suspected of being murderers. Not they, but Mr. Bell kills the peddler, hides his body in the basement.
Okay.
Steals the guy's jacket.
Okay.
Tyler had a nice jacket.
Okay, yeah. And a wad of
and
thick
the maid
wad
saw
of cash.
the jacket.
Right.
And after the peddler disappears, because she wants stuff from him and he never shows up.
Yeah, she wanted to buy some stuff, but she didn't have cash on her.
She is told by Miss Bell.
Here's that thimble you wanted.
Here's the thimble. Use this thimble to hem my husband's new jacket. New jacket, Tyler.
Yeah.
Same jacket she saw on the peddler days before.
And what'd she have to fix? An injury to the jacket from physical trauma, perhaps? Could have been.
More.
Yeah.
The maid, if we want to call her the maid, the housekeeper.
Sure.
Goes down in the basement to get produce. Walks across the dirt floor. Falls in the middle of the basement floor from sunken in dirt. Loose dirt. Tells the Bells. Get this, Tyler.
Yeah.
Mr. Bell says, "Oh, that's just rats. I'll go down and fill the hole." So he goes down and fills the hole more. Okay? Okay. Now, stay with me. Stay with me right now.
I'm here, yeah.
Here's the theory.
I thought that's what we were doing.
Yeah, that is the theory.
Okay.
Mr. Bell buried the body in the basement.
Okay.
Hid the trunk in the wall.
Okay.
Ate a chicken dinner.
Sure.
Threw the chicken bones in the wall.
Okay.
To throw off
suspicion.
The cops from 1910.
Oh, yeah, 1908. Yeah. Yeah, man. Oklahoma had been a state for 1 year at that point.
Fascinating. Anyways, that's my theory, and we can get back to the story.
That's good.
Sorry.
You think they picked up a whole bunch of chicken bones and they were like, this might be human. We have to send this off.
They were big chickens.
Okay.
It's my theory, Tyler.
Have you ever listened to Ray Stevens? He's got this song called Teenage Mutant Kung Fu Chickens. And I'm just thinking, could have been one of them chickens.
You are on to something, my friend. And I also want that CD, so you let me know.
Okay.
Anyways,
I think I have
people
it on cassette.
still play CDs?
Cassettes are better.
Cassettes are better. They're coming back just like records.
They are, yeah.
VHSs, they're on the move.
Yeah.
Anyways,
physical media, guys, grow your physical media collection. Used stuff is what everyone needs.
Well, let's get back to the story then.
Yeah. Leah and her friends are here observing this. The angry mob, the digging. This is not a place to be raising 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, or her own daughter, for that matter.
They're done digging. They're run out of the house. Everybody's staying at David's house. The mob is not done. So they decide, we're going to go to David's house. And so they come back to David's house with physical threats. And, I mean, they're carrying guns and stuff.
Yeah.
These people are crazy.
Yeah.
That's when they feel, okay, this is unsafe, especially for the girls. So Leah decides to take Kate, the two youngest. She takes Kate and her own daughter, Lizzie.
Mm-hmm.
Margaret decides to keep Maggie back.
Okay.
They leave in the middle of all this mob going
Yeah.
on. They leave. Then things kind of like just chill out. And Leah and them are on their way to Rochester.
And I think that's probably a good place to wrap it up for this first episode here.
Yeah.
Because things continue to get interesting, and I just...
Oh boy, do they.
And I'd like to point out that these aren't all, it's spirit rapping, spirit communication, all this stuff, but its start is more like a haunting, a ghost story, poltergeist activity, things like that.
Yeah.
So...
Which just builds into something, in my opinion, beautiful later on.
Yeah.
So, and it's a big part of history, no matter how you look at it.
That's right.
It's still a big part of history. The
Of American
books,
history.
the sources that we've talked about, not so much Tyler's book because it's more of, when was that written? Do you know?
I don't. It's at least a decade old.
Yeah, but the two books that I had mentioned at the beginning are, obviously from the accounts of the actual people, and so it was in the 1800s. So those books, they're in the archives. It's a big part of history.
And those books are public domain. There's no
Yeah.
reason why you shouldn't be able to go out and find those and read them for yourself. It's an interesting read.
Yep. Well, that went well.
I think so too.
Did you enjoy your Toad McGoats?
I did.
Yeah.
My Toad Morton was satisfactory.
You know what I love, Tyler?
What's that?
Is that this whole episode, we're smoking in a garage,
Yeah.
talking about the stuff we like. It's kind of how we got you and Susan got the idea that we should just turn this into a podcast.
Yeah. We have
And
interesting
so
things
that
to
was
say.
that was the foundation. You were coming over to my house
We had some...
once a week at least, and we were talking and you brought up the one night you said, "Hey, Susan thinks that I should start a podcast," and I was like,
She bought me podcasting stuff for Christmas
"Yeah,"
last year.
and you were like, "Yeah, I just don't know," and I was all like, "Yeah, damn right we are," and so we started this thing.
So
and
here we are.
But the cool thing, that was a long story to get to my point. My point is I love it when we can do a podcast episode. And during the very end, my cigar's ended.
Yeah, it just wraps up.
It
Real
wraps
nice.
it up.
Yeah.
It's like it knew.
Yeah.
Insane.
Yeah, we just... Yeah. Timed that right.
Well, everybody, that's our time. Producer's giving me the whole, cut it out, dude.
Yep. Wrap it up. All right. Well, play us off.